Hey YouTube folks, welcome back to the channel. So I've decided to come on here pre-recorded with a nobody you've ever heard of. So we got Mike, baseball collector. He's new here. I don't know if you've ever seen him before, but I decided I want to give a quick preamble, and then I'm going to chat with Mike here about a little bit about a couple things. We'll mainly focus on Hobby Palooza, and we're also going to talk a little bit about the latest videos he did on Bench Clear Media with Ty regarding the sports card market collapse, the impending doom. You may as well just burn all your cards. You know, only the righteous will be spared. It is the end of days. We'll get to all that. We'll see how that plays out. So one quick thing I'll mention though, part of the reason some of you guys may be curious, because I'm a big fan of the live streams, huge fan of them. I enjoy them. I've done 7.5-hour live streams, so apparently I enjoy them. But the thing is that I know that the chat would be very active on this one, and I wanted to make sure that I was able to have this conversation. And long run wise, it's always a possibility. I can always ask Mike to come back and we can do some questions. If there is something, you can put it in the comments. That's perfectly fine. But otherwise, I wanted to focus on the matters at hand, be able to get through the conversation, then we got to have a conversation back and forth, and then afterwards we can always do it. And if there's a reaction, we'll do a live stream on Friday, just like I always do. That's how it's going to be, and you guys can yell at me if you want to. You know, you didn't burn them at the stake, and you know, we'll talk about it later. So anyway, Mike, how's it going for you?
Good. How are you, Carlos?
I'm doing well. So first order of business, we'll get into it. Those, like I said, people can look you up on YouTube's, and by the way, links to everything will be included in the description. So link to Mike's channel, link to Bench Clear, and then we'll talk about a couple of those videos. I will include links to that as well. So you guys will be able to find everything directly from there. Watch it for yourself. I always strongly recommend, if I reference anything, watch the original. If you haven't watched it, then you get the full context, and it usually works a little bit better. So let's do Hobby Palooza first, because that's a nice easy one to get started on. One of the things that I was thinking about, and it was in the live stream where we talked about it quite a bit. So let's start with this first. We had the year where we didn't have the National. So 2020, we don't have the National. It's not going to happen. And you guys decided to do Hobby Palooza. Initially, it took, you guys kind of whipped it together. It wasn't like this big, super organized thing, and then but it happened. But when you're doing it initially, what was the original concept? What did you want initially at the very beginning?
So no National means, yeah, no cards, but you can still buy cards whenever you want on eBay or wherever else. It was the no friends part, no hanging out, that really, I think, was getting me down, and maybe some other friends in the hobby, that, wow, that really sucks. We don't all get to see each other. What if we did an event where during the same week of the National, where we just all hang out on a live stream, just like we would if we were, now, not just like we would if we were together, but as close as we can get in the pandemic ravaged world that we lived in the moment. And so that was pretty quick, actually, to be able to put that together in terms of getting, obviously I first talked to Ty and Jeff for Bench, like, hey, do we want to host it? You know, that's a loose term. Organize it, maybe. It's probably a better way to put it. And would you guys be behind this? And they're like, absolutely. In fact, Ty was like, I know some people at Tops, and Jeff's like, I know people at Panini, and da-da-da. And so we were able to, I knew collectors in the hobby. I knew collectors on YouTube. So it was this, you know, perfect storm of being able to bring all those three things to bear and put together an event. A few weeks beforehand, I think we kind of launched, like, okay, this is like 2 or 3 weeks before. I can't remember the exact timing, but it all came together quick. I'd filled up the slots very quickly with people who wanted to be a part of that. So that was the impetus of the idea.
Sure. And it was, to your point, a volunteer thing. It was kind of like you have this formatted concept, but then it's kind of like, okay, well, who wants to kind of join in? Hey, would you do a thing? And it was a series of live streams, and then you could go to the website and go from live stream to live stream. And one of the things it did, whether that was part of the initial thought process or not, is that it did allow some exposure to some of these channels indirectly, because, well, maybe I haven't heard of so-and-so. But since they're part of the thing and I'm already watching this, and you're going from, oh, hey, I'm finishing up here, you know, go check out so-and-so, and then you can go through. And sometimes people on a couple of them, especially that first year, Maiko did the thing where he invited a ton of people on the screen. So they had a ton of folks on there, maybe that you hadn't heard from. So it was like, oh, they got a YouTube channel? Oh, let me check it out.
Yeah, there were a couple of points to that. Yes, it was voluntary. There were a lot of guys were like, well, what should we do? You know, well, whatever you want. Try to include as many people from the community as you can. In fact, if you look at, most of the streams are not solo streams. They are collaborative to some degree, whether it's Mike O collaborative on the nth degree to, I think I had 2 or 3 other guys on my channel during my live stream, with the idea to include as many people as we could within the parameters that we set. Ty originally wanted to host it all on the Bench Clear channel. I said, no, that's let everybody do it on their own channel so that people can hop around. And if they don't know that channel already, they'll get to know them and maybe see a live stream through that process and maybe become a fan of their channel or whatever. So yeah, so all of that was intentional, and it worked out even better than we thought. So.
Yep, and I do remember in the first one, I thought it did go off pretty well, and I thought it did meet, even though like you said, it was kind of a last minute organizational thing. It wasn't like a big elaborate plan, but it still came off, I think, pretty well considering the speed at which it had to be done. Because around the same time, you also had Jeff Wilson; they were doing their own kind of special. Now that was more of you had a studio, you had like a lot of pre-programmed stuff, and it was very very high technology. And you guys had high technology. You had Bob Lewis, so that's like the epitome of like it's HD. You got Bob Lewis and Stove, so that's like high end right there, production values. This time around, they even had like a skit beforehand, and I like to pretend they just materialized live on the spot. It was some impressive work by them, but regardless, I think the charm of the first version. That's why I say I give the praise with the critique. I like to have a little bit both. I think the charm of the first one is that it did have folks kind of figuring it out. And I like that because it breeds creativity. It means that nobody is bound to a specific format, and it allows, hey, you get those spontaneous moments. That's part of the reason on my live stream, I don't like to pre-program it too much. I used to specifically try to invite somebody every time, but I'd be like, no. One of the gentlemen that joins me, Bobby Burrell, is like, it's kind of a voluntary thing. At this point, I just send him a link, and if he wants to pop in, he can. He usually does because he likes it gives him a break from writing a book. Like he's working research. It gives him a breather. He can hang out and talk hobby, and it's fun. And he's a good foil. We talk back and forth. But I joke with people. It's like he's not on the payroll. The only person who has to be there is me. What happens after that is like we'll see. So when you do that as a live stream thing, then that allows some spontaneity, and I do think people enjoy that. So I think in the first year, I think you got a lot of that, especially since it was new. Nobody thought the concept. So that was the first year. So the second time around, you guys decide you're going to do it. You're going to do it again. Now you have it over 2 days, and you had I think a kickoff party thing on the Friday as well. I think you had a kickoff launch.
We did.
Second year, did anything change as far as what the thought process was or the goals were? Now you had more time to plan. Was there anything difference between 1 and 2?
Well, the goals were to try to repeat the magic, right? Catch lightning in a bottle again. Mm-hmm. We had plenty of, runway to figure it out and what that was going to look like. We didn't know exactly when we were going to do it. We had to, first thing, Ty and I had to be available the whole weekend to be able to do it because Ty's updating the website constantly throughout both days, attaching links, embedding video streams and all that kind of stuff. And what's weird is there were a lot of guys. I put it out there kind of like, hey, who wants to be a part of this? Kind of out into the YouTube universe. Send me an email, do this, do that. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the guys that did it last year couldn't for whatever reason. Eric had, those back pages had to work. Blue Jacket 66 had to work. JT had to work. There were a lot of guys that I would have normally had on that couldn't do it, which really opened up a lot of slots for people that had never done it before, like Victor and Jeremy and Dustin. Those are all people that reached out to me to say, hey, if there's a slot, I'd love it. Mm-hmm. And I said, sure, because I already knew beforehand, before we even put out the dates, put out the invitation, I already knew I was going to have a bunch of open slots because guys that had done it last year couldn't do it for whatever reason. That was all done privately well before the announcement was made about Hobby Palooza and when it was and all that stuff. So publicly, I should say. Right. So all that's happening behind the scenes. We're making sure we can get tops on board if they're willing to participate again. I just think that adds a cool feel to it, that it's not just, it was nice of them to give us, $7,000 worth of boxes to give away. Mm-hmm. And then Upper Deck, Jeremy hooked me up with Upper Deck. We didn't have any contacts at Upper Deck, and Jeremy did, and they sent some stuff. So just things like that we could plan and think about. Well, unfortunately for Tops, for example, they were going to be at the All-Star weekend in Colorado. So they weren't available to do a live stream on Friday or Saturday or Sunday for that matter. Their whole marketing team was there. And so Emily said, hey, we'll be happy to be a part of it. We can pre-record it. So we did earlier that week. We did it with a couple of product people. Some people like that stuff. Some people don't. You know, that's the whole point of YouTube is if you don't like it, you don't have to watch it. Change the channel. And then, you know, I guess, am I answering your question or not? Am I?
Well, you are answering part of it in the sense of how it materialized the second versus the first and how that differs. So that's the first part. So then let me kind of transition it. Well, I'll stick with the same concept, but let me transition it a little bit. So you had the experience with the first one. The second one had to be a little different because you couldn't reach out to everybody. So you had to make some adjustments. You got the opportunity to grab some new folks because they were willing to volunteer. So you slowly fill in those slots. Because I remember on the site you had a bunch of surprise slots, and then they started getting filled in as folks volunteered.
And that was more just rearranging the schedule, not necessarily who was going to be participating. There was like one slot that ultimately was someone that thought he could do it, last minute couldn't. He was like, I'm 90% sure I can do it. So he was a surprise slot, and that ended up being me in an open mic night. I filled in and did that hour. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Finish your question. I apologize.
So the second part of it is just this. So based on that, because it does create a bit of a challenge, because sometimes stuff like that happens. The first time around is kind of a spontaneous thing. You know, you were able to reach out to a bunch of folks and you were able to kind of program it. The second time you got some new folks in because they were interested and willing to volunteer to come in, which was good. Now, based on those two, let's do two parts. So first part is, number one, did the second one meet your expectations? Were you happy with it? Is there some stuff you would love to have maybe done a little differently? How did you feel about the second one compared to the first one?
Well, first of all, we didn't have any expectations other than we hope we didn't have any power outages. You know, that was kind of like, we just hope everything goes off without a hitch. People are going to watch or they're not going to watch. What's markedly different this year versus last year was last year, everybody was home. So the viewership, I haven't even looked at the numbers to tell you, was it viewed a lot more last year versus this year? But I would imagine more people watched last year because they didn't have anything else to do. There were no sports. There wasn't anything else going on. And so it was a much more captive audience than this year, middle of the summer. I know several guys that were going to do it were going to be out of town on vacation, you know. Lots of messages to me, man, I can't wait to see Hobby Palooza. I'll have to watch it when I get back. I'm going to be out of town. So there's just a lot more activity in the world, in life. And so you're just going to have a lot more people that aren't able to participate versus that captive audience, so to speak, you had in 2020. So we didn't have any expectations, to more directly answer your question. And so it was fine. I had every slot filled, and that's good enough for me. I just wanted it to be fun, and people can choose what or what not they want to watch.
Okay. So then playing off that, the second half of it would be, so in this case, expectations were met because there wasn't any specific expectations, which is fair. If, comfortable expectations. So, Bob, congratulations. You'll hear this at some point. You met expectations.
He did.
Good job, buddy. I told those guys, I put in the comments, this is the thing that happened. That was my giving them my pat on the back.
Right.
I appreciate it. So my second part of that question then is, so then would you want to then do another one next year? And if so, given that you now understand that, let's assume, fingers crossed, that next year we don't necessarily have to deal with any COVID issues. Let's assume people are out and about and are able to do their thing. So A, would you want to do a third one? And if so, B, would you change the timing? Would you keep it around the same time? Again, ideally, all things being equal, if you have a chance.
Jury's out. Yes, I can't imagine why we wouldn't, other than it's a lot of work and there's a lot that goes into it. And I'm scrambling to get people. Again, last year it was like, yeah, I'll do it whenever you want. I don't have anything going on. Now it's, I can only do it this day at this time. Otherwise I'm at a kid's softball game or a whatever. I'm going to the lake, you name it. It was a lot more coordination necessary effort this year than last year. I mean, I think people enjoy the concept of it. So why wouldn't we do it? It would be my probably answer to that. I can't see why we wouldn't. Probably the same time, because the idea is also to kind of get people excited about seeing their friends and go to the national, and it's a fun hobby time, right? This lead up to the biggest event in the hobby of the year, and so there's part of that kind of hype and fun and just excitement around that. So I would imagine it's the same time. Some people have suggested doing it a couple of times. Do it in winter when we don't have anything coming up or we're not as busy and all that. And I say to those people like, hey, if you want to do it, go ahead. I mean, once a year is enough for me in terms of how much time and effort it takes to do it.
All right. So let's assume for a moment that you were going to do it, and let's assume you guys are able to get it together and you decide, all right, keep it around the same time. Let's have it continue to be as part of the build up to the national, the road to the national. Would you want to then, looking at the possible things you're going to have, because you're going to have schedule issues. That's going to be part of it. Because right now you got these 1 hour slots and you're filling in these 1 hour slots over 2 days.
Right.
So one of the things we were thinking about, and one of the things we thought about in the stream, and it's more a thought process than anything else. We're just thinking out loud. Is there a thing where there would maybe be some flexibility to be like, okay, maybe if you've got enough time and you bring people on, maybe we do it, or maybe we give you the 2 hours. You have people on, that way it's not just you, and there's a little bit of a mix, because maybe some people can't commit to the time, but they're willing to be a contributor. They're willing to pop on, hey, let me come on for half an hour and chat with you or whatever. Right. So by giving a little bit of flexibility, it means, okay, so you've already covered 2 hours, cool. Now 1 hour is no longer required to be filled specifically. And here you go. The rest of you who want to do 1 hour, 1 hour, 1 hour.
Yeah. The 1 hour just seemed like reasonable.
Sure.
That there was no real well, is half an hour enough to really, go deep into a topic if you want to, or have people on to discuss, the topic du jour, or is it need to be longer? And the reality was, an hour, just most people, if they're doing a long a live stream, not a long live stream like yours, but just, and I remember you guys talking about, don't cap it. Like, just let them, if they have a great point, let them keep going. Well, that's not really fair to the next person that's put it in their schedule to start at a certain time. You know what I mean? If you just let it be open-ended, then, and if y'all can go watch, let's say I'm after you and you're going on a topic. Well, y'all can go watch Mike Baseball Collector if you want, but if you're enjoying this, just stay here. Well, that kind of defeats the purpose, right? I mean, it's, hey, no, we're going to adhere to the rules is not really the guidelines that we've been given.
Guidelines, I think, would probably be a better word.
Yeah.
For you.
And, hey, and out of respect for Mike, we want you guys to go enjoy Mike and what he's going to be doing. Go check him out. And we'll continue this conversation on my next live stream. Come see it next Friday. If you're new to my channel, come see it, whatever. Right. So you have to have a schedule of some kind, whether or not you expand it to where certain people that are capable of running a longer live stream, in terms of their ability to hold an audience that long. There's a lot of, like y'all said some things that were interesting about, why don't you get some newer people, or some newer channels? We had a lot of experienced channels, right? Well, getting on and doing a live stream for an hour and trying to carry that's not an easy feat. I mean, you've been doing it a long time. I've been doing this a long time. Not everybody can do that. There's a lot of guys that have great channels that do great videos and they don't want to do live streams. They're like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to have to figure it out for an hour. They don't want to be live. They want to be pre-recorded so they can fix mistakes and whatnot. Not everybody is cut out or has the desire to be on and carry an entire hour. Again, some people could carry 5 hours, right? But to just make it even is probably the simplest way to do it. And again, newer channels, even though you don't have we didn't have expectations. I found that the newer channels that participated this time got way fewer viewership. People, well, I don't know that guy, so I'm going to take the hour off and go have dinner with my family or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so you want to bring content creators that have a name in the hobby and name in the community to bring the overall audience to the event. And hopefully there's some overlap, and for sure you want people to check out people they haven't before, but at the same time, you need to have people show up to begin with. If nobody shows up because you have all these new channels and 10 people show up, it's a lot of effort, for that. And they can just go do their own live stream or whatever. I don't know. It's a tough balancing act to try to, appease everyone. You're not going to. That's the first realization.
No, that part. So the not appeasing everyone. I agree with you. That I 100% agree. I think part of the reason why I enjoyed having the conversation with those guys, and by the way, these are not like, hey, we demand. No, they're folks
No,
that are very passionate viewers. This
Sure.
is the audience, quote unquote. This is the focus group, so to speak, a segment of it.
Right.
Just kind of throwing out like, hey, I saw this, and it's like, it was all right. It's, but a lot of it, to your point, there are certain types of there are certain formats that will work for some guys that wouldn't work for others. Filmington decided to do an auction on his. And he was doing a little bit of chatting, a little bit of auction, but there was a lot of focus on the auction. For Filmington, though, I've seen enough Filmington to be like, okay, I can kind of have it on in the background. I'll kind of listen to it because I'm used to Filmington videos and I enjoy his stuff anyway, so it's fine. Or when Alico 3 was doing his thing last year, I'm used to his format. I'm very comfortable with this. So it's like, okay, I get what I'm going to get here. Maiko decided to do his thing in a very different way, which was very compelling to folks. He had his dad with him and everything. So that was kind of cool. But then Garrett and Mike, Canadian Cards, they weren't available. They did do a pre-tape and they did their 60-minute slots. So in reality, they did 60 minutes, but they weren't there. They were off in the ether doing their own thing. So there was that combination. To your point though, yes, it is important. Having those bigger channels is super helpful because it does bring an audience. For the newer channels, yes, they're going to draw a smaller audience. When I started doing live streams, I haven't been doing live streams for years and years and years, but I started the first episode that I did, there was like 3 people watching. I'm not the biggest channel in the world, but I'm also kind of operating to a niche audience. They're long and they do get into a little bit of more discussion. There's a lot of that going on. If I made it an hour, it would actually be easier sometimes to retain audience because, it's only an hour, it's fine, then as opposed to multiple hours. But the people that are loyal, they stay for hours and they continue to participate in the chat. But at this point, when we were talking about the Hobby Palooza and all that stuff, there were 50, 60 people in the audience. So, and that's for multi-hours, and that was hours in. So it's one of those things but it took time to develop that. It wasn't going to be an overnight thing. So you're right that the smaller channels aren't going to draw, but at the same time, that's kind of what I was alluding to with the question of, you want to have the excitement leading the national. There is this opportunity. You do want to have the big channels because it draws an audience. Having Tops and Upper Deck participating and having product to give away is awesome because that gives people a reason to tune in as well. But it's one of those things where we were looking at it from the perspective, I think the guys were looking at it from the perspective is like, it is a potentially great show. It doesn't mean fill all the slots in with new people, but just interspersing a couple in between, like having a big creator, a small one, maybe a big one, a small one. Again, there's going to be no perfect, but it's one of those things like, outside of just having a thing, what is the purpose going to be going forward? What other than we've got this thing, we'll have big channels to draw you in. We'll give away some prizes, but we'll try to feature some folks in, and it might just be having the big creator bring people on, and then maybe that's the way they get the connection. Being like, hey, Filmington, do you mind bringing in a couple of these folks? Maybe these folks would have a good conversation with you. Filmington's audience combined with a smaller creator, and maybe you get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, that's several channels actually did that. Brought in channels with 100, 200 subs, and that's great. Yeah, of course, that's a great idea, and we would love that. Again, it's still about trying to, and it was encouraged to all of them this year. Hey, get as many people as you can that you want to have a conversation with. The more collaborative, the better. Make it as inclusive as you possibly can. Very few people did solo deal. Victor did, Andy did. But Andy last year had, Ryan Card Collector 2, big channel, and then Michael, his buddy, small channel, so it's, we'd love it to be of course it'd be great to be a mix, people to have that opportunity to get their name out there.
Mm-hmm. All right. No, that's fair. Anything else in Hobby Palooza wise that you want to kind of get out there? Any thoughts that you have? Like you said, ideally, that you don't see a reason why there wouldn't be a one next year. But obviously there's time between now and then to kind of figure it out, and let's see where we're at, this point next year. Anything else Hobby Palooza wise you want to say? No,
we're good.
All right. Sounds good.
We covered all the things that I had thought that, hey, let me try to answer that from our perspective, me and Ty and Bench Clear, although it's really a community event. It's not meant to be Mike's this guy controlling all of it. I'm open-minded about all of it for sure, and want to make it better. So any ideas to try to make it better, I'm willing to listen.
Okay, so actually, let me throw this in at the end. For anybody, if somebody wants to outside, like I'm talking directly to you, but outside of this venue, outside of inviting you onto a show to talk to you directly, if anybody wants to give feedback or wants to offer suggestions or whatever, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so they can put in at thehobbypalooza.com, they can put their information and put down there. There's a part there for comments, suggestions, whatever. I think it says like, who are you looking forward to seeing the most? But you can write any question in there and put a suggestion, whatever. Those all come directly to us. So,
All right, sounds fair. So I'll leave that link in the description as well, so that it's there. I've included in a couple of ones where we mentioned Hobby Palooza. I included a link to it as well, but I'll include it in this one just so that everything's included and it's consistent and it's solid.
cool.
So let's shift over then. We'll shift gears over to the video set of videos you guys did. You did a part one and a part two, and then also there was the audio version, which I've got on my phone, which was interesting. It's the same content, but it's in the video it's split out over two pieces. First part was kind of laying the groundwork. It was based on the gentleman's name escapes me. I think it was Bishop.
It was Bishop.
Yeah, so that was kind of the impetus. And I also remembered that Ty did a piece about Wells Fargo pulling lines of credit. That was a kind of led down the path of thinking out loud the possibility of people pulling from PSA, oh, if it's not worth for me to get, PSA only charged me when they grade. What if I just change my credit card number? And I kind of broached that idea the other week or two ago on my live stream as well, kind of thinking of the Wells Fargo conversation and kind of playing with that. And then that's kind of extended into this whole credit idea. But based on the credit idea and the potential of other bishops being out there borrowing money to buy cards in a market that is dropping, you guys then parlayed it into the two pieces. Do you want to kind of give the synopsis, the thesis?
No, that's kind of it. You said potentially there's more bishops out there. I can guarantee you there's more bishops out there. How many of them? I don't know. Mm-hmm. But there are lots of people. One guy commented that he has $250,000 of credit card debt.
Oh, I saw that one. I'm going to assume if you're saying 240, I think it was 240.
Whatever. Yeah.
But Mike, I've got $27.8 million, in debt in sports cards.
Right.
So, as you well know.
Sure. I mean, sure. Anybody can say whatever they want to say.
Yeah. But I know there are people. I say potentially just to be polite. We know I'll say one quick thing about that part. I think the point was very valid that you got, and the Bishop, conversation was very interesting. That it led to an impetus. My only thought process was, it was like, oh, duh. This is a revelation? It's like when the numbers went up so fast, not for you guys, but I'm just saying in general terms. It's like, guys, when the money goes up so fast, not all of you suddenly tripled your salaries. My math tells me, without having to overly think about it, I was like, so this is news?
Yeah, y'all were making that point the other night. We weren't shocked. We're not shocked
Correct.
by any of this.
Yes,
this
correct.
isn't like, oh my gosh, what's happening?
Mm-hmm.
It is, but the Bishop video was very honest. He was,
Mm-hmm.
hey, here's what happened to me. Mm-hmm. Don't let it happen to you, kind of thing. And so it made me think, how many other people are dealing with that? And it's not going to be guys like me and you that have been in the hobby I've been in the hobby 40 years. I'm not going anywhere. I have no debt on cards or any of that. And there's plenty of people out there like that. Mm-hmm. But in the last 18 months to 24 months, how many new people have come in and never seen a down card market? They always think, well, I can buy this card today, and man, next month I'll be able to flip it for twice the money. Mm-hmm. That's a mindset that is pervasive within the hobby among that type of person. I'm not even going to call them collectors, because they're not really collectors. They're investors / flippers. And that's who we were really talking about. If you want to talk about the liquidation event that we think is going to happen and the price.
We'll get to that, because I love that phrase, by the way. I love the phrase. I enjoyed it. It was very catchy. I like the phrase.
But, so it was to talk through, what does that mean for the hobby short term, i.e. national? Sure. What does it maybe mean in the next 6 months, 1 year? What does it mean for the hobby? Mainly from hey, we're just stating what we think. We know there's a lot of cards being graded, right? 180,000 a week, according to Retro Hoop Collectibles. And that's only going to continue for 6 or 8 more months. Every week, close to 200,000 new slabs are hitting the world, right? Are coming into the world. Are all of those for flippers? No, I got some out there that are going to be, locked in the dark cave here for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to, I have no slabs at PSA, cards at PSA that I plan on selling.
Mm-hmm.
That's not why I did it. But how many of those millions of backlog cards are there to be resold once they get them back? And what 20 days turned into 20 months or whatever, in terms of wait time to get the cards back, and the dynamics have changed, the markets have changed. And so there's just two segments of the hobby. And we were talking in particular about the investor flipper people that are not long-term in the hobby. Like you said, and several guys said, I haven't changed anything in terms, I buy less cards, 18 months, but collecting, I'm still doing what I do. So it's just, you have to zig and zag and adjust. I guess one of y'all used the word adjustment, and I thought
I'm a big proponent. That the phrasing I like to do is that, and I say, I give the exaggeration to make sure that people really understand. Sometimes you have to exaggerate for impact and effect. I go, guys, it could go up 5,000%, and I don't care. It could go down to minus. I could have to pay to keep the cards in here, and it's like, it's fine, whatever.
Right.
But that's because it's over a long-term view. I haven't been at it quite as long as you. Like I'm a young pup. I've only been at it 31 years. So, 5 minutes. But the point is that if you are in it, and I tease my buddy because we don't have the national, but we've got the expo over here. They've been running it since the early 90s. I wasn't there at the first couple, but I've only missed 2 or 3 of them, and they're twice a year. But I've been outside of pandemic where we didn't have them. But outside of that, I've been to them. That when we get the chance to do this one, I believe the one in the fall they intend to have. So if they manage to pull that off, that will be the first one I've attended in the 2020s because of reasons.
Sure.
But if I manage that means I would have attended that show in 4 decades. And that's just the way it is. I was attending in the 90s. I started in the mid 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s, and the 2020s. The only reason the 2020s hasn't already happened is just because of COVID. Otherwise, I've already been done in 4 decades. So it's one of those things. But that means I got to see the 90s, the end of the 90s leading in and coming off the junk wax era, and then into the late 90s where we were still enjoying ourselves. We were having fun, and they were handing out promo cards and all. That's why I laugh. It's like, guys, even during that quote unquote down period, collecting was still fun. We were having a good time. We were enjoying ourselves. It wasn't as big. And then eventually it ramped up and started to get bigger and bigger again, a little bit. But that's just the way it works. It's in cycles, and that's fine.
Yep. And that's kind of the point that we were trying to make. It certainly wasn't to try to, God, we're not going to influence anything. We have 1,000 people watch the video. I mean, we're not influencing anything. And we're certainly not talking about dealers. Like when we talk about a liquidation event, it's not, I don't think every dealer's there is going to be there to lose their shirt. Mm-hmm. That's not the point. You got old school dealers there, and I'm talking about the guys coming with all this, the slab tsunami that's happened and all these modern, ultra modern cards that there's 20,000 of them, and they're coming there as a patron / I need to offload these cards. Mm-hmm. That's the liquidation event I'm talking about.
Okay. So that's a good clarification though, because it wasn't completely clear in the initial video. That's a good clarification to make. So let's discuss the video a little bit, because there's a couple of directions, and you've touched on a couple of beautiful spots that I want to hit on here.
Go.
So now we'll have some fun with this. So first order of business, when we got into this, so first video was to lay the groundwork. Second video then was to talk about the national and what's going forward and kind of you guys projecting forward. Now, one of the tricky things to do is that you guys did use data to talk about how we've had those downs. We also, Ty also mentioned the Zion Williamson, it's 18,500, right now PSA 10s, obviously going to explode past 20,000. That's an example. There's a lot of that, all this big, your point, tsunami of slabs, all good. Where it gets tricky is projecting forward.
Right.
Because you're in a financial advisor position, you understand this, and it's the favorite thing about when you look at a prospectus. Past results are not a guarantee of future results. Paraphrase, but it's that.
Sure.
So even just because we're seeing a certain thing, yes, we can project it to continue, or in this case, projecting it to accelerate, because the whole idea is we're projecting to accelerate. But what makes it interesting is that there are a lot of little factors in between. To your point, some of the dealers will also adapt. If they sense that opportunity, they'll also be sharks in the water, so to speak.
100%.
So that'll kind of play into it, and that could be a factor. So let me play a quick clip here. And there's two pieces I want to touch on with. So this is directly from the video. Again, I'll include the link in the description for folks so that they can see it for themselves. I'll just play about a minute. We won't go too far into it, but I just want to include it in here so that we've got context. So there's you guys. You're wearing a similar color shirt too. Look at you, the consistency.
Well, I'm TCU guy, purple.
There you go. Purple. All right. So let's play this. We should have the audio on here.
Everybody just handing out $100 bills to buy all these sports cards from people in their Pelican cases.
Let me slow you down here a little bit.
I tell you, here's how I'm thinking about the National right now. 2 weeks to go till we'll be sitting in Chicago, you and me, is I'm like, it's Shark Week right now too. So I'm like a shark. I smell blood in the water. And I am ready to go on a frenzy. I am bringing cash to the National. And 3 months ago, I would have told you I was nervous being able to find deals. And I wonder if anything will be priced to where I can even feel comfortable buying it. Now I am that shark in the frenzy, chomping at the bit to get there. In fact, 2 weeks is good because that'll allow things to kind of start cratering even more, continue to crater. And I'm excited about what I'll be able to pick up at the National. I'm looking forward to it.
Now, there's a couple of things about that. And the point, I think, is reasonable. Like I said, I really don't have an issue with the general premise of it. But one of the critiques, and this is where I had what I thought was interesting. I like to develop my opinion. I rewatched it last night just to get it fresh in my mind, just so I watched it again. I'm not really an emotional guy on any of this stuff. I don't care. And this is one of the fun things about my live stream. I try to talk. One of the beauties of it, guys, is that I can separate the emotionality from it because I'm probably the least sentimental collector out there that has any nostalgia. You do need some sentimentality for nostalgia to even work. It's the fuel that keeps that going. But I have the lowest ratio of sentimentality to nostalgia. I don't care about they're just cards. I can live my life, but I have enjoyed it. I've collected for 31 uninterrupted years. I kept all the way through. But the thing is that I could easily see, and for me, it's two things. And this is where sometimes it gets interesting when I watch this stuff. It's not just what you say. It's the presentation. It's the delivery. The delivery is always part of it. So I went and I asked a couple of other collectors, some folks that I'm in message threads with, because I wanted to get their opinion. I wanted to get their thoughts. I had the folks on the screen. I asked them their thoughts. I asked some other folks in the thoughts, including YouTube Hall of Famers. I went to the creme de la creme. I wanted to get multiple opinions, but it was all over the place. There was different things. It's like, okay, no, seems reasonable. I get it. But one of the things that came up from time to time from them separately is, I don't know if I'm reading it right. And I'm paraphrasing, but they go like, well, I don't know if I'm reading it right. It's like their points are reasonable. They seem kind of giddy about it. They seem kind of excited at the premise. And that was the way they phrased it to me. Not what I told them, is what they phrased it to me. And on the actual video, you guys have a pretty basic, sparse description. It gives a link to the other video and all that. But on the podcast version, we've got some text here. First, these are just our opinions. As you know, both Mike and I are heavy collectors with a massive love appreciation for the hobby. Anybody that thinks we're rooting for a massive pullback, ... would be misinformed. So that's
I'm not rooting for it.
No, I get it.
If it happens, I'm giddy about it. Great.
I understand.
I don't care either way. It can go up. Great. If it goes down, even better. I get to buy more stuff. So yes, I'm giddy at the opportunity that might present itself completely independent of anything I do or say.
Okay. So, let me pose the second question, because the guys that watch my show, they know that number one, I like to be devil's advocate, but also number two, again, not being emotional, I'm not offended by it either way. Right. So my question then would be like, why aren't you rooting for it? Because the quick question, let me lay groundwork and then I'll let you reply. In order for the cratering portion, because you included the piece about the time gap between the time you're having this conversation and the time the National would start, creating an opportunity for it to crater further. Well, in order to crater, you need desperation. And you put up that chart about, the levels and everything, which I've seen in the past. I've dabbled in the economics things once in a while here and there. It's a passion of mine. But the thing is, when you have that, in order to develop that level of debt, because just having people who may take a haircut is not enough motivation. It's not enough impetus for a sell-off. You need desperation. You need somebody who's just about to have their house foreclosed. You need somebody who needs cash money now, or the credit card bills are coming due. So the only way this works, the only way you would get these potentially massive discounts would be for cratering to happen. And the only way we're getting cratering is if this occurs. So why wouldn't you root for it if you want those prices?
Well, again, there's a difference between what I might think is a good deal and what a dealer might think is a good deal to buy a card.
I agree.
If I'm buying it 20-30% below recent eBay comps, that's a good deal. If the dealer bought it for 50% below eBay comps and they're selling it to me, I'm great. Good for them. They made a little money. I'm still buying it way cheaper than I had expected to 2 months ago, 3 months ago. Win-win. Great. I'm not, I just want a good deal like anybody else. I'd pay $1 for every card that I have. I don't care. It's not about, trying to, because I'm not turning around to sell it. I could care less. Do I want it as cheap as I can? Of course I do. Who wouldn't want every card as cheap as they can? And I don't know if I'm answering your question or not. Why am I not rooting for it?
Everything you said is perfectly valid. I totally understand it. So my question is, given that if it comes to pass, you would get a potentially better deal, why would you not root for it?
Well, because you're rooting for other people's failure.
You are.
And that's not how I'm built. I'm not rooting for, again, there's a difference between rooting for it and just, if this comes to pass, I'm going to be really excited.
Okay.
I'm not sitting here going, man, I hope I hope things are cheaper, but I'm not sitting there going, man, I hope at your expense, Mr. Whoever you are out there that has that card that needs to sell it for whatever reason. I agree. Desperation is not there yet. I think the National might be an impetus for desperation because all these Pelican case carriers are going to be coming around and they're going to realize they're not going to be able to get the prices that they might have hoped they would or expected that they would. And they might get a little desperate. And that's where I think dealers that have the ability to take on inventory and want to do that, or other people walking around and they look in the Pelican case, hey, I love that card. I'm going to be looking for that. I'm going to be looking for people. Now, probably not a lot of people walking around selling the stuff I want to buy, but if they are, and I can buy it cheaper from them right there, great. But rooting for it, I think, is a term that I don't know is fair to describe as me and Ty rooting for it. It's happening whether we root for it or not.
No, I get it. The reason I brought it up was twofold. Like I mentioned, I asked folks, I wanted to get their opinion without my input. I just said, what did you think about this? And the giddy piece came up because obviously, as you were saying that, Ty kind of had that smile on his face and he was almost giggling to himself as he goes. Again, it's not about what you say. It's what you say, and also it's how it comes off. It's the presentation.
Everybody's going to perceive it differently.
Exactly. But you could see how someone could, just watching the clip and question. I didn't doctor the clip. That's straight from your video.
Yeah. But I can't control how someone perceives it.
I agree.
Someone receives it. I'm going to just be myself all the time. If you don't like it, or if somebody disagrees with it or has a problem with it, not you particularly, but anyone out there, sorry. I mean, ask me privately to explain, or, I can't explain everything that someone, ad nauseum that might get upset with something that I say on a YouTube video. I would never do anything else but try to explain myself better. Take it for what it is and agree, disagree, knock yourself out. I used to care. I don't care anymore. So think whatever you want to think.
No, I get it. But as I said, the reason that it was twofold. It was that first part. And then also, like I said, Ty kind of acknowledged it in that little write-up. He basically just went and explicitly said, anybody who thinks you're rooting for this, ... would be misinformed. So I just thought it was interesting. It was included there. He must have gotten some feedback to that effect. Otherwise, it wouldn't have come up inside the little write-up for it. Now, let me pose a question to you then. So let's go back to the premise. Like I said, I wanted to play the clip, but let's go back to the premise, though. So the Pelican case, folks, we're not focusing on the dealers, to your point. So now we got that clarification. So the dealers probably, if they sense blood in the water, they would probably take advantage of the situation and be like, hey, I'm buy mode. Let's do this, because they're going to have some money in hand to be ready to go. The other thing that I was thinking about, though, as well, because as you say, I always say sports card YouTube is very small. It's very niche relative to the other pieces. Like the biggest channels we have are small potatoes compared to the PewDiePies and like the really big YouTubers.
Right.
Very different category. But even 1,000 views or 1,700 views or whatever the case may be, it does circulate around because you did the reaction to Andy Sports Card Investigator's video, and it started off kind of small, but then it also got extra traction because you played it, and then other people saw it and they got their commentary going on it. And I heard your video reference in other content creators in the space as well, not necessarily by name, but as soon as they say the underlying premise, it's like, well, there's one video that says collapse right in the title. That's pretty much you. So, by the way, just as an aside, I love referencing stuff, but it's like, cite the source. I like throwing it in the description. At the bare minimum, throw it in the description so that if somebody wants to reference it, hey, at least what you're referring to is in the description.
Right.
I'm showing these videos. I'm including the link so that you guys can go watch the whole thing without me pausing it and see for yourself if you haven't already watched it. It's better to get the full context. But the thing with this decline, if that works, and Ty was referencing the whole smart money thing, which I'm fine with, and I agree with that concept. But that also put on the other side of it, you have the dumb money. So the Pelican case, folks, if they hear it, it doesn't have to be from a specific source. If they get a sense of it, though, and you feel like the market is going in that direction, and you believe that that will continue, why wait till the national? You've got time to get rid of your stuff first, because then to your cratering comment, well, then that would necessitate additional sell-offs. One potential outcome could be that you get the scenario you're talking about, but what if the sell-off completes before the national gets going? And then by the time the national gets going, like any market, if a stock is falling, but the company's not broken, people sell off because they're worried, but eventually the weak hands leave the market, somebody else scoops it up, and then it stabilizes, and then it slowly creeps back up.
Agreed. Again, we're talking about cards that are only getting more and more play. I'm talking about the ultra modern baseball, basketball stuff. I'm not talking about 52 tops Mickey Mantles. They're, so the collapse I see is in that ultra modern where you're just going to have an overwhelming increase in supply of those cards of Ja Morant rookies and Zions and Lucas and Treys and all those guys. That's the part of the hobby that I think is collapsing.
Okay.
Or on the verge of it, I should say. And if those people want to try to get rid of them before in that particular segment of the hobby, smart on them, I guess. Good for them to do that. I'm not looking for those cards anyway. So that's not the giddiness. I'm not excited because Zion's going to be.
Okay. But then fair enough. But then here's my follow-up question to what you just said. If that's the case, so then does it have any impact on the cards you're looking for? Because you're not buying those. So if the Zion goes to $1, right, how does that affect, PSA Hall of Famers?
It doesn't. It won't have any effect on me.
So you walk in and the PSA Hall of Famers are going for about the same price they were going before, or for whatever reason they bump up a little bit. So it had no impact.
Well, so I did a video with Ty a couple months ago. Well, maybe not even that long ago. This month, actually.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I tracked the values of 15, 20 of my biggest cards, and they're all down 20, 30, 40, 50, 60%. Mm-hmm. Some of them is only down about 20, some of them 60.
Is that a sufficient discount for you?
Yes, all day.
So but are they not available on eBay now? Is this a case where you're waiting to the national, where at the current price point you are satisfied at the stuff you are looking for? So really, you're not looking for a collapse in those cards because theoretically they're already at a price point you're satisfied with.
Yeah, but they could. I mean, I'm not saying they couldn't.
You would like more, but I'm saying you'd be satisfied if they stuck over the next 10 days. You walk in and they're still basically where they were now. That's fine. Yep.
It is, because we've seen. So again, people, this is all semantics, right? But correction versus crash. Mm-hmm. If you just use stock market as an example, a correction's 10 to 20%. Mm-hmm. Beyond 20%, it's a crash. They call it a crash. That's the name of it. And so anything that's down more than 20% from the peak, not 100-day moving average or average selling, but from the peak price, the decline, that's where we're saying a lot of this ultra modern stuff could go down 90% from peak. Mm-hmm. At that point, vintage is already down from peak. Again, as I referenced some of the cards, 20, 30, 40, 50%. Sure. From peak. I wasn't willing to pay peak. I'm willing to pay half of peak. It's still more than it was 2 years ago.
And that's a valid point to make sure. All I'm doing here is I'm establishing some of the nuances because we're actually breaking up the granularity. It's a very different thing than sports card market collapse versus ultra modern high pop sports card market collapse. It's a very different connotation in that title.
And I mean, again, we weren't trying to answer every single question. We weren't trying to get too granular with it.
Okay.
Not intentionally to try to deceive people or anything, but just we didn't bring it up. I guess is we are actually talking about, based on what you guys discussed on your live stream and some other people's stuff that we've seen and comments that we've received, doing a follow-up video to more clarify some of these points, like just kind of the stuff we're talking about now.
Yeah.
Dealers versus Pelican case carriers, you know, I even said, I think as an aside in the video, I don't think every card's going to collapse, you know, and that's true. They're not. That's just not going to happen. But there are certain segments of the market that it would not be unreasonable to see that happen over the next 6 to 12 months.
I get it.
The stuff that's coming in. So
I get it.
No, I don't think vintage will go down a ton more. I wouldn't be mad if it did in the next 10 days. But I don't know. I've had cards, like you just said, to a point you just said, cards that I literally was like, should I buy that now? No, I'll just get it at the National, you know? And I mean, it was a good price. I'm like, nah, let's see if I can get it a little cheaper at the National. If I can't, I'll come back and buy this one on eBay. You know what I mean? It's like, that's kind of the mindset now, 10 days out, is don't buy anything big. Just, even if it's a good price, because it might be cheaper. And if it's not, you always have this one to fall back on.
No, I think it's a fair breakup in it. The reason why I thought it was interesting, like I said, I'm in a position where I'm not casting judgment. I'm not casting aspersions. I'm merely posing the question. And I love when we get into the granularity, it gets a lot more interesting. It gets a lot more clear. But again, going back to perception, when you look at the title, obviously it doesn't encapsulate that. It leaves open the possibility. When somebody looks at it, the sports card market collapsed. There's a whole sports card, but there's a lot in there.
And hopefully they'll watch it. Maybe that's clickbait. I don't, if that's what people define as clickbait.
It is the definition of clickbait.
And great, click on it and watch it. And hopefully you'll agree with some of the things. You might disagree with some of the things. You'll leave a comment to that effect.
Right.
And there can be a conversation about it. But again, if nobody watches it, no matter how granular we get, it doesn't matter. I'd rather have some people watch it from a 30,000 foot view, and then we can dive deeper if necessary, which we actually plan on doing. So
no, that's fine. The reason why I thought it was interesting, I wanted to get the clarification from you, and the clarification is good because it makes it a little more clear. It separates out the pieces a little bit better, and the picture becomes more clear as we go into it. I just found it interesting because I referenced that Sports Card Investigator video. You did the reaction to it. The title was clickbaiting. It was 100% clickbaiting. But then when you click into it, it's like, well, I'm looking at it from the buying perspective of a person who's doing it more business-like. You did break it down in your video, by the way. You did, to your credit. You did break it down in your video. But then I scrolled down to the comment section of your reaction to it, and there were people that were like, oh, this guy doesn't get it. It's like, you didn't watch the video. You read the title. You have a case study on your own channel of you reacting to somebody else's video where people watched your reaction to somebody else's video and still didn't bother to watch the video and then made their judgment at the bottom of your video, which was harsher than some of the judgments on the original video.
And I told them to go watch the video, watch it for yourself, make your own conclusions.
And people don't, but
no,
people
they don't. And that's happened to me a lot in my YouTube career, and that's fine.
Yeah, but like I said, the reason why I brought it up is I thought it was very ironic, given that it wasn't that long ago that reaction video was done, and here we are again. Yeah. It's a title. It's all about the title.
Yep.
Yeah. So no, that's fair. But that's the reason why I said it's like the delivery and how it comes off is always very interesting. And then obviously Ty got a little bit. I get it. The clarification was done on the audio version. A little blurb explaining that. We have a little more clarity. When you can ask the question, that's why I do like the live stream format, because it does allow for that nuance and it allows you to expand it a little bit. Because then somebody in the live chat is going to be like, wait, do you mean all of it? Well, no, I mean this. And then I mean it because of this. And on the spot, you can basically make the adjustment and be like, let me be more clear. This is what I'm talking about. Here you go.
Yeah, we were trying to be clear about that we were talking about flippers and the people that have only, let's take it this way, maybe not even flippers, but people that have only been in the hobby a short period of time and have only seen growth. They've never been through what you and I have been through in the hobby, ups and downs, both of which we both feel that, okay, it's been fun the whole time, whether card prices were great, card prices were not so great. I still have a good time with it. It's a hobby. It's fine. So the newer people in the hobby, those are the ones that I think are going to be surprised. Oh, you mean this stuff can go down? You know, that'll be interesting to see that dynamic at the National.
That's fair. So I think that's as far as your video is concerned. I'm satisfied with that answer. I think it gave some more clarity. But let me pose a question to you. Again, I'll have
Yeah.
some fun devil's advocate style.
Go.
And let's use the economic side of things.
Sure.
The points about the population is true. Let's use that Zion, Prism.
Sure.
PSA 10, 18,000 headed towards 20. I think it's 100% true that the price could drop off on it, but it's one of those things where I feel like based on the numbers that it will run, because I think gemrate.com also did an analysis, and they took, I think, for the month of June, 277,000 of them were ultra modern, but specifically basketball. So it's like one sport and like a segment of it more modern. And everything you said could be 100% true, but it's always one of the fun things about markets. Even if you have something that's available in abundance, and in theory that should cause the price to drop, it only causes the price to drop if somebody's able to sell it, and then the comps increasingly go down. If it's just a thing where they stubbornly refuse, if you've got somebody who's got enough liquidity to get 500 Zions in, it's like, you know what? Come hell or high water, I'm not selling at that lower price. So then it'll sit there. So
Right.
the float, the items available in circulation, there could be 20,000, 50,000.
Right.
But if there's not 50,000 in circulation, then it'll be whatever the last sale is.
But at some point they're not going to hold them forever unless they're a huge Zion fan.
No, for sure. But it's one of those things where then that could push it past that timeline where it will impact
Sure.
it eventually. It's just a matter, again, it goes back to desperation. How badly do you need to get out of this? But if you've got 500 Zions that you send in one order, you probably have enough money to pay for it. So that person may be like, yeah, I don't care. I'll let it sit for 2 years then. So be it.
There could definitely be those people out there that have the ability to do that. I think a lot of them, there are probably equally as many bishops as there are equally the people that can hold 500 Zions without having to resell them and pay for the order and wait and be able to float that. So you got massive spectrum, right, of hobbyists, people in the hobby with.
I only pose the question because you need, for the thing to work, for the change to happen either up or down, you need to have the sale. Because it's one of those things where even if we know the supply is huge and we know the demand is not enough to meet it, if it's just not there, it's not like anybody has a chance to lowball it because it's not there. For something like the Zion, we know that there will be some that will float onto eBay. We know that. We know they will appear. But it just depends on the card. It depends on the item. Some of them, they should go down. But if there's less of them and people just refuse to sell them, or they just sit on them, like, whatever, I don't care.
Or they put it at some month ago buy it now price and refuse to change the price. It'll just sit there. And that's what one point Ty made was percentage of PSA cards that have been listed that sold. And it runs 35% normally. It's 15% now, meaning either more people are putting tons of cards on eBay to try to sell them at a price that people are unwilling to pay. And so that would drop the percentage. I mean, that's the only thing that would drop the percentage, really, or just people not buying stuff, no matter what the price is, right? It's not cheap enough, so I'm just not going to buy it. So those two things are happening. Like it's data. It's not like we're making it up. Now, how much further does that go? Look, we threw out 6 months or whatever number we threw out there, and 90%. Yeah, we might be right. The sun might also come up tomorrow. No, I mean, it's just, you got a shot of being right with that, or the clock will be right twice a day, right? It's not that we're hardcore going, oh man, this is going to happen. Like, if it doesn't, I mean, we'll admit we were wrong. It didn't happen because of whatever circumstances lead to it not happening. Either people hold on to their cards or whatever. We'll also call a spade when that time comes too.
Sure.
Say, hey, we were wrong. It went this other way. It went back up. All of which will be great. Whatever. We're just reporting on it and talking about it. Either way, no matter how it goes.
No, that's fair. I do that. Like I said, the reason why I enjoy having these conversations is because I'm a geek for the economic factors. I love looking at the different possibilities, but it's a spectrum. There's a whole bunch of possibilities and we won't know until it plays out. Because we had a show in Dallas this weekend, and we also had a show in Atlanta this weekend. And there's going to be some stuff coming out of that now in the next couple of days, where there are some folks who'll give back a little bit of feedback in terms of what they experienced, good, bad, or indifferent. There'll be a little bit of a mixed bag for sure.
For
And
sure.
some of that momentum may or may not carry over to the national, and we'll have to see how it goes as it plays into that. And some folks are going to wait. Some folks are going to, do some stuff there. Like I said, maybe some of them offload some of the stuff right there, and then they're done with it, and then they don't even head off to the national. The second thing I was kind of curious about, because again, I'll play off Ty's, the smart money idea. So the smart money is not a new concept, but it plays into one area. But with the smart money, you got to have dumb money. So is there a possibility then as well? Again, anything's possible, but is there a possibility then that there's enough people that just don't really pay attention to the market enough? Mike wants 50% off. He doesn't get it on the first try, but he's going to come back around. Somebody behind him is like, oh, I'll take 25% off or 20% off or 15 or whatever. I'll take the first offer the dealer gives. Is there enough? My question is there enough dumb money? Do they outnumber you by enough where maybe it's just a wash? You come out of it kind of stagnant. Not higher, not lower, just kind of in the middle.
100%. That's very, very probable. And dumb money, maybe uninformed money, or just.
Well, the problem is we started with smart money. Where do you want to go as the opposite?
Yeah. I just think, again, naive money, maybe.
Sure. If we want to be really polite, sure.
Yeah, I'm trying to be polite. Sure. Naive, just they don't know any better. And that we've seen that people paying prices for cards.
Sure.
They're going, why did you buy that? Because that's what it was going for. That
or
was
they're
the
they're just consumers, and they see a sticker price and they're like, okay, I'll pay the sticker price, whatever.
Yeah. Again, if you're newer in the hobby, you don't maybe have the understanding of the art of negotiation and you don't have to pay that. Like, if you really don't want to, I mean, you can, if you feel free, it's your money, do whatever you want, but you can probably get it cheaper if you just ask, And I've seen so many collectors going to the last few Dallas card shows, not this weekend, but the last 5 or 6 that they've had. And I see people just walking up and, what do you got on that? Okay, great. Done.
Mm-hmm.
With zero negotiation.
Yep.
And I wish I could stop them and go, hey, how long you been in? I wish I could do a quick, poll. Mm-hmm. Like, how long have you been doing this? But you just observe and watch. And so, yeah, I think there's some naive money that will be at the national for sure. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of that, a lot of people going for the first time. And you could even have just people I'm excited to be here. I'm going to buy a card. I'm going to pay whatever it is.
What's the cautionary tale that a million of the national goers say? Hey, don't spend all your money on the first day. Why do they even say that? Because it happens.
Yeah. Yeah. You wouldn't give the warning if it wasn't something that needed to be warned against. And, I tell people, walk the floor and see what's out there. And I've had this happen where I saw a card, got to a price that I still wasn't quite comfortable with, come back later, okay, I'll get it, go back later, and it's gone. Mm-hmm. That's the risk I run as a consumer, and I'm willing to accept that risk. And there's a lot of, man, I wish I would have pulled the trigger on that. Instant of regret, and then move on to the next thing, right? It doesn't derail me or get me all in a tizzy and get my glitter all unsettled. That's the thing my wife says. Her glitter.
Well, as long as your glitter doesn't get unsettled, that's important.
Yeah.
The thing is, the glitter stays. It doesn't go away. Like, you guys know the glitter thing. It doesn't leave. How can it get unsettled? It won't leave you.
So anyway, there's going to be a lot of naive money.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of it. That's part of the new hobby that we're in.
That's the reason why. That's the reason why I say, when you guys did it, like I said, I had no problem with the conversation because I think it brought up a follow up, a potential very interesting. That's why I had some fun with it in the live stream. I said, hey guys, what do you think about this?
Yeah.
And it was going to be initial thoughts. I wanted to get first impressions on a lot of those guys because they had only just had the chance to watch it recently. Like, it had just come out only days before. So as you go forward, though, you're like, okay, so I've had some more time to think about it. I've also seen some responses to it that's talked about this, that, and the other thing. So let's kind of piece some thoughts together. And with the additional clarification, that's why I say there's so many factors that kick into it. The only thing we can definitively say, here's what I'm willing to say. I think you'll agree with me on this. I think we can get consensus. So coming into the national, the hobby will be higher, lower, or exactly the same.
In terms
I'm saying I guarantee it will be higher, lower, or exactly the same. I'm asking you to pick.
Oh, I was about to say.
No, I'm not asking you to pick. I'm saying I guarantee it will be higher, lower, or exactly the same. Guaranteed 100%. Take it to the bank. We're done.
And on any of those 3 places, I can have a great time at the national.
Yeah, and that's fair. But that's the reason why I say the conversation's fun, because the factors exist and there's so many of them. And that's like in any consumer thing where you're thinking about, because the thing I always try to repeat, I love the analysis. I love the data. I love the facts. But the one thing that gets downplayed is the emotional aspect of it. I separate myself from it on purpose because I want to give a sober analysis. But the people inside are not doing that. The people inside of it are reacting to your point. Maybe they're new. They see the shiny thing. It's time to buy. Let's go. Somebody else goes, oh, I've been here a couple of times. Oh, hold on. Let's negotiate a little bit. I like the shiny thing, but I want to negotiate on the shiny thing a little bit. And then there's folks in between.
Yep. I've had that emotional wanting to buy something in the moment and getting all caught up in it. And I'll call a friend and, hey, come over, talk me out of this, or tell me it's a good, tell me either way. They're not emotionally invested in that decision that I am in that moment. Mm-hmm. That's a good cautionary tale for people. Have someone else that isn't going to be just crazy about that in the moment, that can rationalize with you, good or bad. Mm-hmm. I didn't have a problem if he would have told me, no, you're an idiot to buy this card. I'm like, okay, thank you. And I wouldn't have bought the card, So having that is important. There'll be a lot of guys there that don't have that, right? That don't have the ability to call someone, or, and they'll just buy it. And that will happen.
Sounds good. So I think that covers a lot of kind of what I wanted to do. The truth is I do this. I literally do this every week for hours, but let's refrain and let's restrain ourselves a little
right.
bit.
Hold on. I want to make sure we covered everything I wanted to cover.
Go for it. Sure.
We did.
Beautiful. Pretty much right on time. That could have been a Hobby Palooza episode.
It could have. You'd have had to apologize to the next guy, but that's all right.
I'm not really apologetic. I don't remember the last time I apologized for anything. So
well, I appreciate you having me on to clarify some of these things, because you did, when you guys had your discussion live, it was okay. I can see that. I'm open-minded as well, and was listening to that, the points being brought up, and you playing devil's advocate, and just some as you're using the word granularity / just deep dive into it is helpful, I think, to help people understand where we were coming from. And I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to do that.
No, absolutely. I always think there's value to it. I try very much, the way I phrase it is I try to make sure there's a teachable moment to all of this. Because as I said, and I said to you before we started recording, we have mutual friends, we have mutual enemies, and we have mutual frenemies. So I'm a little bit on both sides of the fence. That's why I said I want to give a fair treatment to this. So my goal at this is, like, I've watched your stuff. Some of the stuff interests me, some of it doesn't. And I always take the approach, like, for me, by the way, you won't really see comments on me from anything or thumbs down, because it's like, if I don't like it, I don't watch it. I just click it off. But when it's interesting, even if I don't necessarily agree with every piece, I'll watch it through to the end, develop my own thought process on it. And then if I got questions, then perhaps it's time to ask some more questions.
If there are other questions, I'm happy to try to answer them as best that I can.
Sounds good. So very good. Appreciate you doing that clarification as well. I think that it will be helpful for some folks. And the takeaway, the teachable thing is, get past the clickbait title and watch it all the way through. You'll probably get a little more out of it, and accept that there's probably going to be some nuance. And do take advantage, though, I would say, advise everybody in general on this video, on that video, on any other video. If you're not sure, ask for the clarification. Don't assume, because if you run to the assumption, a lot of times the reaction is to the title instead of the video.
Right.
Yeah. And that's always a dangerous place to be. That's never a good spot.
Yeah. I have a lot of videos that literally, it was posted 5 minutes ago. It's a 14-minute video, and I have 4 thumbs down before anyone could have literally even watched the whole video. That happens.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
People just react to whoever's doing it, me, for example, or the title of the video or whatever. I would tell everyone, like you just said, watch it first before you make a judgment call one or the other. You can still dislike it, but at least know what you're disliking.
I think that's fair. I think it's fair. So to close it up, we'll shut her down here. But before we go, Bench Clear Media, Baseball Collector, the YouTube channel. And I think, are you still doing Golden Age of Cardboard?
I am.
Okay.
I'm taking a few weeks off just because of the National and being busy with other things. And that'll get ramped up again after the National. Yeah.
And that's still in the Bench Clear, or is that on your own channel?
It's Bench Clear.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Yep.
And going forward, you got a wealth of topics and things you're going to go into?
A ton. Mm-hmm. Never ends. Always picking up stuff. So that's what I went back to Baseball Collector for, was just to do my my mail days that are more for people that just want to see vintage stuff and have me talk about it. And the more hobby related stuff we're doing on Bench Clear. The podcast we're going to keep doing on Bench Clear, because that was a Bench Clear kind of creation. Ty helped me do that. I would have never done the podcast without Ty's expertise in that area. So that's been good. So yeah.
Sounds good. So those are the spots that you can check it out. I'll include links to the appropriate thing. As I said earlier, the videos that we talked about, the one we played a clip on, and the various YouTube channels, I'll include that in the description. So thank you, Mike, for popping in and making some clarifications. Now we can all vilify you properly with additional information.
I love it. Bring it on.
Sounds good.